Hey everyone, Sparrow here. Welcome back to Sandstone Eco Zoo, where today we're finishing up the tropical house by adding a lush greenhouse enclosure with a saltwater crocodile. Let's jump right in. As you can see, on our left is the cassowary habitat from the previous video, but we'll be focusing our attentions on the right wing of the building and also the connecting portion you see in the center, that weird triangular room. The nice thing about creating a building over multiple videos is that some of the guesswork is taken out for you. For example, I know what pieces I'm using for the walls already, I have a general idea of the style of planting on the exterior. Basically, I can focus my attentions on other things and just be a bit more creative with those small but very important decisions out of the way. First things first, I'm setting up the walls of the building, and then we're going to add a PVC curtain at the entrance to make sure that tropical hot air stays in this portion of the building. We're not spending extra energy trying to keep it super warm in here. The path is going to wind its way through here so guests can look into the crocodile enclosure, but also so we can have a planter on the other side, really immerse them in the lush greenhouse feel as they walk through. I also decided to place an exhibit near the far wall. We'll put the burrowing cockroach in here since it's the only Oceanian exhibit animal that doesn't have a desert exhibit box, and hopefully that will blend into the planter nicely later on. Once that's in place, I can start digging out the pool for our crocodile. It won't be super deep. I do want our visitors to be able to see the crocodile when it's in the water, and there won't be an underwater viewing area of any kind. I feel like we've already got that covered with the little penguin enclosure. I did place down a 1 meter tall mud wall just to get a sense of where the water line is going to be, seeing as water can be placed in 1 meter increments, and also use the rectangle trick to visualize where the water will be while I'm terraforming. Cuts down on the back and forth nicely. I tried my best to keep to the Zoopedia specifications with this one, but once I started adding a bunch of foliage, I believe the crocodile dropped into the orange zone for water space. It is, however, very close, so I think I can live with that. And once I'm happy with the water area, I'm going to put up my null barriers and add a staff gate at the back of the enclosure so we can get our crocodile in here and really get a sense of the traversable area. There will only be one female crocodile in here, and the reason for that is that females are smaller than males and their hitboxes are much easier to work with. So she'll be on her own in here, just chillin'. I don't think she minds. I did find it super funny that the first thing she did was booked it for the escape points on the other side of the enclosure. So obviously our next step is some barriers. These are inspired by some barriers I saw at a plant conservatory I visited recently, also in their tropical section, so I thought they would work well here. It's just a pane of glass, a silver fence post to make it look like something is holding onto the glass, and then a marquee beam on the side as a divider between panes. Very simple. I don't think the space needs much more than that. The fewer pieces we use, the better. And of course, once we have one, we've got them all, so I'll just place those along the path edge. To cover up the path, I'm using these stained wood wall panels and creating sort of a boardwalk through here. Making sure it's lining up against the barriers. The other side will be covering up later, so not too fussed about making sure it's perfect. To allow our guests to exit, I'm just stealing the glass doors from the front of the building. If you want to see how those came together, make sure to check out the cassowary video that I'll link in the top corner right now. And then we'll also place that tropical wall planter above the door, minimize the wall space since this portion of the building is slightly taller than the cassowary building. Filling in gaps with the panel pieces. I think panels of any kind are my most used piece in the game, especially plaster, since that stuff just fills out any crack you need it to. With the guest side coming together, it's time to start on the actual enclosure. There will be a planter on this edge along with a mud wall to provide a more man-made feel to the side of the pool. Not only does it cover up the ugly terrain work, it also provides a buffer between the animal and the people, in the sense that it's safer for a carnivore to be further away from you, but also in that people can't just drop things into the crocodile's pool. If anything, those items would end up in this planter, and that's not that big of a deal. Keepers can always scoop it up if need be. As you can probably already tell, we're going to have to do so much foliage work this time around to make it look nice in here, but it is starting to feel a bit more like spring. Well, maybe not where I am. I was below 25 degrees Celsius the other night. I'm just really itching to do some gardening to channel my energy into growing and creation, but since I can't really do that with real plants at the moment, I will settle for some Planet Zoo planting. Over on the entrance side of the enclosure, I wanted a rocky cliff to separate the pool from the land area. Give the crocodile some walking room that leads it down to a sandy bank where it can access the water. The other reason why I wanted rock on this edge of the enclosure was to cover up the support posts for the staff bridge I'm going to create right about now. This was a combination of aquatic fences, highly recommend the aquatic pack for anyone who doesn't have it, and mesh. That's it, 2 types of pieces, very simple. And then a little gate at each end to make sure no unauthorized personnel make their way into the crocodile-infested waters. Now back to the rock work. If you've been watching my videos from the beginning, you might know I don't usually like mixing rock textures. True North Sanctuary was all tiger rock all the time, but building in SCZ has really made me reassess that. So in addition to the dark tropical rocks, I also threw in some of the faux rocks. I thought it made sense since this was clearly a man-made enclosure inside a building, as well as some dynamic mossy rocks with a technique I don't think I've shown before. So I select the rock I want, press Ctrl X to open the advanced movement menu, and then select the same number of rock in the mossy variant. From there I can adjust slightly so it's peeking through the other rock and makes it look moss covered. I've seen people use this for snow-covered rocks before as well, it's super useful. Just make sure you have random rotation turned off if you want it in the exact same orientation. Lots of rock work in this one, but here I was once again fighting with the traversable terrain because I wanted these rocks to provide a basking spot for the crocodile. So I needed it to be able to go all the way to the last rock where we'll be setting up a heat lamp in a little bit. Stay tuned for some custom item building tips. Since this is supposed to be a tropical greenhouse, we will be spamming foliage absolutely everywhere, starting with the pool. Lots of underwater plants. I like this one because it takes up a lot of space so you don't have to mess around with little pieces. But I did break out of my shell and made sure to use a bunch of eel grass both underwater and on land in this enclosure. I think the brightness and curve of the fronds has a very lush vibe. Also, lots of the common reeds, these ones cut into traversable area, whereas cattail reeds don't, but I liked the look of these ones better for the enclosure. To add some height, I decided I wanted only mangrove trees. I do like the palms, but something about them wasn't working for me this time around, but the coastal mangroves brought a more swamp-like feeling to the enclosure. Sometimes you don't know exactly what you're looking for until you see it, and that's exactly what happened here. And the way those roots drape over the stones, like, come on, it's perfect. I did end up adding more strangler fig roots in between afterwards to fill up some of the space on the rocks, as well as plenty of ferns, fan palms, elephant ear plants, all that jazz. My planting style, as you can probably tell, is very chaotic. I don't stick to one spot, but I generally try to stick to a single plant and then dot that around the enclosure. Sometimes, especially now that I'm getting better at this game, a specific plant will pop into my head and I'll place that in that spot before I forget about it. But for the most part, yeah, very chaotic now that I'm watching this back. I do also have to shout out my favorite 2 tropical plants as of late. The Kentia palm, which comes in this little version that you can stick practically anywhere to fill things out, and the tetrastigma vine, which same deal, great for filling out empty spaces and even vertical spaces as well. Tropical leaf litter as well holds a special place in my heart for adding enclosure details. One final thing is this liana vine going from one mangrove to the other. It just felt very empty here, but this frames the space behind the trees a little better. We'll eventually be placing some enrichment here so guests can get a glimpse of the crocodile through the swamp. To create a backdrop, I'll be using the tropical panels along with some added greenery later like the tetrastigma vines, basket ferns, etc. Adding bark pieces along the bottom, maybe they're worn out in some places from the crocodile rubbing against them. I know they like to do that to shed scales sometimes. And to anchor it to the ground, some of the faux rock blocks, always making sure to rotate this way and that to prevent it from looking too similar. Grabbing some color codes from other rocks, one thing I do wish Planet Zoo had was a way to store color palettes in the game. That would be an amazing feature. Just have a collection of colors for different rock types, for example, or the brand colors of each zoo you're working on. I store things like that in Word documents, but having something natively in the game would be really awesome. Also going to mesh over the vertical garden, make it look like the plants are secured to something, add more detail. Little things like this make the biggest difference, as well as rotating the panels to get rid of that repeating pattern. Time to get a heating lamp sorted out. I'm stealing this design from Caesar Creates, sorry. He has a lovely crocodile enclosure at Elm Hill City Zoo, and the amount of time I spent puzzling over pieces was way too high. But I ended up using the conservation bulb, the ceiling fan rose, and one of the plate pieces. All of that recolored to gray for a metal look, and the light to a red shade for that heat lamp feel. I do hope our crocodile appreciates the effort. More rocks. These are a blueprint from the Steam Workshop. I'll make sure to add it to my collection. They're so great for, again, adding detail, making the enclosure more lived in. Unfortunately, with the crocodile hitbox, you do have to be careful with rocks because even the tiniest bit might block their traversable terrain, but I managed to get that all sorted out. For the doorway, I also had to mess around with the hitbox a bit. If you weren't already aware, the hitbox is the length of the animal, so it has to be able to turn around in any spot in the enclosure, which is why this door is so long in comparison to the animal's width. But we will make it nice and short, continuously check the traversable terrain during the design process so we're not surprised later on. Using our little gutter trick to provide a track for whatever sliding door there is, and now we can make our way into the backstage portion. These fences are the same as in the cassowary enclosure. I figured we might as well keep them the same throughout the building. I did also consider adding a pool to the backstage area, but there just wasn't enough room with the way terrain and barriers affect each other. I did really want to make it happen, but maybe next time I build for a crocodilian. Instead, I spent a bunch of time doing little things like a switch to open and close the crocodile door with. This is just the light cable from the Europe pack and the interior switch from the base game. Also used a bracket piece and the New World bulb to make this green and red light just to show whether the door is open or closed. Now, another thing I really wanted to include in this building was a water filtration system. Since there is so much water in this building and the zoo is trying its best to be environmentally friendly and reuse water where it can, such as with the hydroponics system, I thought this would be a cool feature. The water filtration tanks are from the workshop Amazing Blueprint by Taves, amazing creator here on YouTube as well. And in the floor, I cut out this little section so that I could have some of the pipes exposed. We're going to have a few lines running through here, some cold water, some hot water, some intake and outtake. I actually have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to water systems, but hey, maybe it sounds realistic. So some of those pipes will go all the way through into the crocodile enclosure, and then I'll slap a piece of glass down over that just to make sure none of our staff are breaking their legs falling in. On the guest side of things, we'll have a small viewing window through here so that they can get a glimpse into the backstage part, how our crocodile pool is cleaned and cared for, and some of the education behind water filtration. In the enclosure itself, just adding some drains to further push that filtration idea, sinking the bubble effects in so that the drains look like they're doing something, and also to add a little more life to the habitat. To finish off the boardwalk, I'll be adding some benches, which I'll then cover up slightly with some of the Oceanian rock to make it look like they're built into the planter. This planter will have pretty much the same plant life in it as the enclosure, really trying to bring the same feel to the guest space to make them feel more immersed in the experience and like they're part of this swamp the crocodile lives in. That's Habitat Design 101, bring elements of the enclosure out for a more cohesive experience. We're going to do the same thing on the exterior of the building after we've rearranged some of these plaster pieces for a nicer looking plaza. Again, creating a planter, this time with the same metal girders like last time, filling with mulch, and then adding rocks and plants that can serve to immerse guests and also help hide the ugly edges of the plaza. It's finally time for the roof, adding a skylight over top of the crocodile backstage to brighten it up, and then sliding these plastic rectangle pieces into place around it. This section of the roof is at the same height as the top of the cassowary building, while the edge of the roof over the crocodile enclosure is going to be just slightly higher up, not even a meter difference. However, I wanted to spice this building up some more and really give it that greenhouse feel, so I took inspiration from the reptile house at the Berlin Zoo. I've been there exactly once and it was a great experience, and I was looking through some pictures recently and saw this roof on the reptile house. I'm not making it anywhere as detailed as the real thing, but I did want to add some elements to make it seem more realistic. So we have the glass, the marquee beams settling it into the roof, some cables underneath the glass which will help to support our lighting and ventilation systems, and also a support system on the outside, which is the main part I liked about the roof in Berlin. So I used the hinge pieces to create these triangular supports all along the length of the window, and I think it turned out looking really nice. I'm very happy with it. And since I was working with grid pieces, it made it super easy to copy it across at exactly the interval I needed. One last detail to add to the roof, some fluorescent lights. I've been teaching a lot lately and schools have these everywhere, so I'm pretty familiar with what they look like. Here I just used an LED tube, the LED clamps, gutter pieces as a case, and then added brackets, chains, and cables to help secure it to the roof. We'll scatter those along the length of the building and then also add in some fans in between. It's likely to be quite hot in here and hot air rises, so we want to push it back down towards the crocodile and the guests. If you're still here for the finishing touches, thank you so much for sticking around. We'll just be adding the ductwork and some lighting in the backstage area, as well as these little solar garden lights in the planters. Our tropical house also needs a name, so thanks to that Aussie bloke for your suggestion. The Daintree Discovery Center is named after the Daintree rainforest, which is the largest rainforest in Australia at over 1,200 square kilometers. It is also home to both cassowaries and saltwater crocodiles, which makes the name perfect for this tropical house. We will be building another house in the zoo in the future, so if you have any suggestions for a name for a night house, please do leave them in the comments below. And the finishing touch to today's build, this gorgeous water tower off in the distance. With the new filtration system, the zoo does not need to rely on it quite as much, but I do love having it in the background. So that's it, Daintree Discovery Center, home of the southern cassowary and the saltwater crocodile, is now open to visitors. SEZ continues its environmental mission with a state-of-the-art water filtration system, and its animals continue to enjoy a safe, natural environment where they can thrive. Tune in 2 weeks from now to see the start of SEZ's very own night house, and don't forget to drop your name suggestions in the comments. We're almost halfway through our animal roster, and this is where Sandstone Eco Zoo stands as of today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.